Hi, I'm John Green and this is Crash Course World History. I know I look a bit different than usual. I got a haircut. Today we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite country, Africa. More specifically, the regions of South Africa. Dan, I know that Africa's a continent. I just want to see if anyone pointed it out. Let's start with the Age of Imperialism, which occurred around 1830 to 1918. There's a group of Dutch settlers called the Boers who were living happily in their little colony they called the Cape of Good Hope. But then the British arrived and the Boers were in for a bumpy ride. The British would take over the Cape of Good Hope in 1830 and the Boers would be forced to move north in a movement which would become known as the Great Trek. On top of the whole I just lost my home, I have to find a new one deal, the Boers would clash with African natives along their journey, so they weren't exactly having a blast. But we're talking about imperialism, not the boring Boers. You see, Britain mainly wanted to claim more land in South Africa because they could reap the economic benefits of having more areas to extract natural resources from. And this theme can be seen later on in other events involving the British. But the conflicts between the Boers and the British aren't finished yet. Diamonds and gold were discovered in South Africa and people from all over the world started flooding in to seek their fortune. However, all these outsiders concerned the Boers that they would gain political rights. Eventually, rebellions would rise up and the Boers blamed the British for them, which doesn't make too much sense. The two groups would go to war, which would become known as the Boer War, and the British would come out successful. This gained the British more land and in turn strengthened British imperialism in Africa. Speaking of strengthening imperialism, in the year 1899, the British Mercantile Company, the Royal Niger Company, gained control of the palm oil trade along the Niger River. The British were able to do this because of one man, Sir George Gold. Gold was able to combine the efforts of several smaller companies into one big Royal Niger Company. The company would become mandated in 1886 and the British would control all trade at the basin of the Niger River. This is significant to the South African region because it was the first act of Britain's dominance in that area. The impacts of the Royal Niger Company still last today because South Africa's economy is still recovering from Britain's exploitation. But even after the Boer War, the Royal Niger Company, and the Cape of Good Hope, the British decided they wanted more. In 1914, the British claimed the entire area of Nigeria as a British colony. Having a colony would strengthen their British Empire because they could overpower the natives and claim everything as their own territory. This was significant because it officially marked British imperialism in South Africa. Soon, it would completely change the lives of those living there, culturally, economically, and religiously. Because of this, many tribes, cultures, and ethnicities were merged together by the borders drawn during imperialism. This created conflicts because of all the different ideals and religions. And the British got a lot of money. Now that we've talked about imperialism, let's talk about decolonization. By 1948, there were growing tensions regarding wartime restrictions and increasing living costs. White farmers were unhappy because black laborers were leaving farms and moving to cities and demanded that new laws be passed. Then the 1948 elections came when Dr. D.F. Malan was elected as the leader of the National Party. He promised that South Africa would belong to the Afrikaners, or Africans of Dutch descent, once more. He then established decrees to bring the lands of South Africa taken by the British back to the Afrikaners. And now, an open letter to the National Party. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment. An empty bottle and a piece of trash. Two things that should not go into the same bin. Dear National Party, you treated blacks and whites much like how we recycle. And that's not cool. Best wishes, John Green. You see, when the National Party came to power, they introduced apartheid laws, which put a gap between blacks and whites by separating them in housings, schools, and more, because one party passed laws to preserve white supremacy. The main period of decolonization in South Africa was during the mid-late 20th century. One significant event during this time frame was the anti-apartheid protests. Activist Nelson Mandela led the African National Congress to protest and spread the word of the unjust apartheid. Nelson Mandela was born in 1918 in a small village called Mavizo. He wanted to end European control over South Africa and return it to those who lived there. In 1962, Mandela gathered laborers together and started a workers' strike. He was sentenced to 5 years of jail for the protest. Within a couple years, he was charged with plotting to overthrow the South African government with multiple ANC members and was given life in prison. Although Mandela was not released from jail until 1990, 27 years after his initial life sentence, a lot happened during his time in jail. His anti-apartheid protesting, as well as the strong leadership of the ANC, sparked more and more awareness on the topic. The apartheid was finally abolished in early 1990s. The same year, Nelson Mandela was freed from jail. The ANC selected him to be the first president of South Africa post-apartheid, as well as the first black president in South African history. After Mandela was elected as president, he organized a group called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was designed to help those who were treated unfairly by the law of apartheid. Thousands of Africans who were discriminated and segregated by the apartheid were given a chance to provide their testimony to the commission, which acted as a court. Because of this, thousands were given a second chance to undergo prosecution without discrimination. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a significant part of starting a new democracy in South Africa. By giving this second chance to those who were affected by the apartheid, South Africa grew further apart from its previous colonized state. It was a step towards a nation where race did not have an effect on the outcomes of a court. Now, if we come back and take a look at the present, we can trace some of today's issues back to imperialism. Currently in South Africa, the ANC is having land distribution issues in 2017. People have not been returned their ancestral land, and only some parts of people's communities are benefiting from this land. On the 28th of February, the ANC held a debate to decide whether they should change the constitution to allow for land expropriation without compensation. This draws back to imperialism when the natives were stripped of their good farming land and were forced to purchase goods from Europeans to survive. Anyways, to conclude this crash course, Africa is a continent. Thanks for watching Crash Course, and as we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome. I don't think anyone actually says that.
Hot dogs are great. We need French fries to sustain our economy. This is why we should buy Vans, because that supports what we need to rule South Africa. And Ethan is on his phone over there and he's doing nothing because the audio's not going to be there anyways, so.
We have to seize the means of production.
I'm shaking.
You can't see me laugh. Redo it.
Icebergs are melting.
Okay, the
like
bridges,
the penguins
the
are
dam,
dying.
the infrastructure is breaking down.
China is
Our economy has gone to
going
complete
down.
crap.
Everyone,
Okay,
oh my god,
we need to
like
fix
we
this.
know